Lori with Behavior Education at Spirit Keeper Equine Sanctuary. Today is Sunday, March 29th, 2020. It's Super Dwarf Sunday, and it's time to check in with TC and see what he's up to. Since last week's episode of Super Dwarf Sunday, I haven't actually had any interaction with TC except to check on him. And actually, all of the footage from last week's episode of Super Dwarf Sunday was filmed during the previous week. This whole week, TC has been in his humid hide. It's all right, TC. So TC is in a shedding cycle. He's going through ecdysis, or preparing to shed, and he has not come out of his humidity hide in a week, or over a week. Since he last ate, he's been in this humid hide, and he's definitely in blue. His eyes are super, super cloudy, and we are not going to bother him, but I do need to clean his enclosure. And so we are going to set him down and leave him alone. And I'm going to cover the hole on that humidity hide with his other humid hide. And then that's gonna leave me the freedom to go ahead and do a complete clean out of his enclosure and maybe give him some new items and change out some of his old items. The point that I want to bring up about what I just did is how easy it was for me to remove TC from the enclosure because he was already in that humid hide. And that humid hide is a plastic container with a lid on it that I've just cut a hole in. And I use hides similar to this, at least one in every single snake enclosure, because it's super easy to manage animals if they're already in a hide. That's easy for me to just lift out. You all know that a lot of the reptile hides don't have bottoms. And that means that if the reptile or the snake is in one of these hides, there are methods to do it. You can slide something under the bottom and then lift the whole thing out, or you're faced with lifting the hide and then getting the animal out. Usually that's no problem. If your animal's used to handling and used to you and is feeling well, then that's easy to do. But if you have an animal that is in shed and doesn't want to be handled, that isn't used to being handled, or isn't a friendly animal, or is an animal that's not feeling well and not in the mood to be handled, or if the animal's just sleeping and you feel like doing enclosure maintenance during their sleep time, it just makes everything so much easier if you can just lift the whole hide out, cover the hole, do what you need to do, and then put the animal back in. Part of today's video is going to be me showing you how I make these hides and what to think about as far as where you want to position the hole and some other uses for these hides other than just a humid hide or a regular hide within the enclosure. Okay, we are going to set TC up with a new humid hide on one end of his enclosure. When I change out enclosure furnishings, typically I won't give him a bunch of new stuff at once. I'll leave some of the old things in there and I'll add maybe one or two new things, especially since he's in blue this week. His eyes are completely clouded over, and sometimes it's difficult for me to tell when he's in blue because his eyes are so light, but it's really obvious this time. His eyes are very gray. He's probably going to shed within the next few days. So I don't want him to wake up from his shed cycle, so to speak, to everything new and a whole bunch of changes. So the only thing that I'm going to change is I'm going to take out one of these hides because he just no longer uses either of them. There used to be 3 in there, then it went down to 2, and now I'm just going to put 1 back, and I'm going to show you how we're going to put this back in. He only ever used this when he was in his quarantine tub. Since he's been in his 4-foot enclosure, he hasn't even used these hides at all, except to lay on top of, and actually I've put his humidity boxes typically on top of these hides. This is an example of a humidity hide that I made for another snake, and it's out of a deli container. You can see the nice hole that's in the center. I use a hole saw to make these humid hides and to make the holes in them. This is the new one we're going to put in. So we're going to leave TC in the one he's already in right now and put that back in. But on the other end of the enclosure, we're going to give him this bigger one, and it's just a regular 6-quart tub. I really like this because you've got a lot of options. You can sit it on top of another hide that you have, as long as that hide has a flat top, or you can set water dishes on top of the humidity hide, or you can set, like that's what we're gonna do for TC once I drill the hole. We're gonna put this hide on top of it so he can go in the hide and then climb through the hole into his humidity box. But you've really got a lot of options. I typically put the hole on top when it's a shallower hide like this. But if you're using something that's taller like this for a humid hide and you don't want to put the hole in the top, you can put a hole up high on the side. But the reason that you want the hole on the top or on the side up high is because you don't want the snake dragging all the bedding out of the hole if you put it too close to the bottom. Now, if you're gonna use this box as a regular hide, and I do, so I love my hole saw kit because I make holes in tubs all the time. I like to, for enrichment, put different tubs in enclosures with different types of substrate in it. And sometimes I'll just put a plain tub in there with a hole in it for snakes that want a smooth bottom on the hide. But I'll put different ones in, and so they can choose to lie on aspen or choose to lie on cypress or choose to lie on a paper towel or a moist washcloth or damp sphagnum moss. I have my jungle carpet python. Out of all of her different hides and furnishings, she likes to lay in a plain tub with nothing in it. Nothing, no substrate, anything. Her favorite spot to lay is in a tub similar to this that's just plastic all the way around that I haven't added anything to. And so your snakes are gonna prefer different things. I have some snakes where I've provided a tub with aspen bedding in the bottom and the rest of the enclosure has a different substrate, and they'll use the hide box with the aspen in it almost like a cat litter box. That's where they will go to the bathroom. It's just some different ideas, different things you can do. I even, in one of my brettle python enclosures, have holes cut in the top, and I have water filling half the tub because he likes to swim. And so it's kind of like a swimming pool for him, and then he can also lay on top as a ledge or shelf. So there's just really a lot of options that you can do with these. I'm going to show you how I make the holes, and this is going to be TC's new tub. If you don't know what a hole saw is, it's not a separate saw that you have to buy. This is just a regular drill, and you can buy a hole saw kit, and it has different sizes of attachments in it where you can drill different size holes. Now, let me show you. I like to be able to have the option of plugging that hole if I need to take the snake to the vet or I need to contain that snake for a longer period of time than me just plugging the hole with another container the way I did with TC. And so I have a whole bunch of these round screen vents. What you want to do is match up this with the correct size for your hole saw. That's the size hole we're going to drill in this lid for TC. And that way, if at any point in time I want to plug the hole up that we're going to drill in here, then it's easy for me to just put this screen vent in and the hole is plugged up, and he can stay in there for a longer period of time if I have to transport him, if there's an emergency, or if I'm just going to be working on his enclosure for several hours and I need him to sit in here. Which, as you know, with TC, that wouldn't happen. I would put him on an enrichment activity like one of our activity stations or the snake tree. But if you have a snake that you can't handle or isn't friendly, this comes in super handy. And I do have a few of those snakes here that I just don't handle. They don't like it. They don't tolerate handling. They'll bite, they'll hiss. They're pretty close to being wild. And so this comes in super handy for those types of snakes where once they're in the box, I can put this over the hole, I can set them aside, they're not stressed, I'm not stressed, I can do what I need to do, and then I can put them back in their enclosure with the hole unplugged and they can come out when they want. So it works really well. I'm going to use just a regular drill to drill this hole, but I'm going to attach the hole saw to it. And the kit's going to come with everything that you need. Now you want to be careful when you're drilling these holes. These deli containers are pretty cheap and flimsy, and so you want to be very careful not to break or split the plastic when you're using this hole saw on it. This Sterilite container is a little bit more sturdy and it's going to break less easily. This type of container, which is Snapware, is obviously more expensive, but it's a lot thicker. It just depends on how much you want to invest in the tub, and I tend to invest quite a lot because I reuse these for all different purposes. I use them for transport containers. I use them for temporary holding. I use them for humidity hides. I use them for regular hides. I use them for swimming areas. And so it's worth it to me to invest a little bit more. This one was like $1 and this one was a little bit more. And then of course you can buy a ton of these deli containers in a pack pretty inexpensively. So it just depends on your long-term use and how much you want to spend. You can put duct tape over the spot where you're going to drill, and that's going to help mitigate any unnecessary cracking or splitting. But I've done this enough times that I feel like I know just the right amount of give and take to make sure that I'm not splitting the plastic. So you need to make the decision as to where you're going to drill the hole. Do you want it in the middle? Do you want it on the end? Do you want it in a corner? I tend to put it in a corner because then that leaves me the whole rest of this surface for something else, like a water dish. So if I want to put a water dish on top of it, or if I want to put another hide on top of it but not cover the hole, you're going to want that hole in a corner. Now I'm going to put the hole kind of offset from the corner because I'm planning to put this hide on top. You can put the hole wherever it's going to work out for you. Just keep in mind that the further towards an edge you put the hole, the more usable space is on the rest of the container, either for a water dish, a hide, or for the snake to lie on and use as a shelf. You're going to end up with a round piece of plastic. You're going to end up with a nice hole in your container. It shouldn't have sharp edges. You're going to put your sphagnum moss inside. And my favorite is New Zealand sphagnum moss. And that seems to be what the snakes prefer as well. I've tried some of the other types of moss and the snakes either don't use it, or it molds easily, or I don't like the way it smells. I really like this Humid New Zealand sphagnum moss, but that's just my personal opinion. And that is the preference that most of my snakes have shown me. And then we're gonna moisten this. And you want it to be damp enough that a little bit of excess water is coming off when you squeeze it. Actually, I think I moisten this just the perfect amount. If you squeeze this and a lot of excess water comes off, then what I do is I let it drain to the other end of the tub and I pour it out. But this is just the perfect amount. All of the moss is damp and I hardly have any excess water draining out when I squeeze it. So now we put the lid on and that's good to go. Now, this type of container, let's say I was going to plug this up for transport or for him to be held in for a few hours. I would only use this type of tub if I'm going to be with him or in the general vicinity most of the time. I wouldn't leave him unattended or leave him overnight or leave him alone in this container because the ends don't snap shut. So if you're going to be transporting the animal or you're doing it for, say, an emergency evacuation, you're going to want to use a tub that's got snapping edges, and this one even has a handle. Obviously, this isn't big enough for a snake like TC if he was going to have to stay in it for any length of time, but this company that makes these makes all different sizes. I've got much larger ones that are from this same company, and they're pretty sturdy. They have handles, and they have these lids that snap on. So you want to keep that in mind as well. I'm going to go ahead and drill into this one just to show you some options as to where you can put the holes. If you're not going to have any substrate in the tub, that could come out. So if you're only going to use a paper towel in here or reptile carpet or no substrate at all, you can drill the hole down here towards the bottom and you put it in there and let the animal just use it as a regular hide they can go in and out of. And then they've also got the top that they can lie on as a ledge or a shelf, or that you can set either another hide on top of in case your animal likes to have an elevated hide, or you can put like a water dish on top of to leave some of your ground space free for you to use for other things or for your snake to use for other things. But what I'm going to do for this particular tub is drill a hole kind of near the top because I feel like that gives me more flexibility. So what I did on this one is I drilled the hole near the top. That gives me a lot of flexibility because now I can use this to put water in the bottom of. I can use it to put moss or other substrate in the bottom of. I can put nothing in it and let the snake just use it as a regular hide. And it leaves the top available for me to put an elevated hide on, or for me to set something like, if this wasn't set up to be a humid hide, just a water dish on, and it's freeing up space elsewhere. You can even drill more than one hole, and I am probably going to do that in this particular one. Here's also an example of a same type of tub, but this one's a little bit shorter, but it has a little bit more floor space, and I drilled a hole in the top of this one. So again, if I wanted to, I could put a hide on top. I could even put a water dish on top of that. I like things that are stackable because then it leaves the animal more space on the floor to move around, or it leaves you more space on the floor to put more rocks or climbing items, additional hides, branches. It just, if you can stack things, it gives you a lot more options than if you can't. So I'm just spot cleaning this, and he has ReptiChip in here right now. So I've found some pros and cons about the ReptiChip. It is not as easy to spot clean as aspen bedding or the forest floor bedding. It's easier to spot clean once it completely dries out. And this right now is completely dried out. I've let it dry out on purpose because I knew I was cleaning his enclosure today. So you've really got to sift through the pieces to pick out any fecal matter or any urates. But it is able to be spot cleaned, but you've got to dig in there a little bit harder than, say, if your bedding is a paper towel or aspen. I like that it can get wet and it doesn't mold easily, although if it gets too saturated and your room's very hot and humid, it can mold some. I've found some mold on it, but not much. For the most part, I can let his water dish overflow and he can swim and then get water on the ReptiChip, and it's fine. What I don't like is when it is wet, it stains things. So when I was just cleaning his water dishes in the other room in our sink, I noticed that his white water dish has stains on the bottom from this ReptiChip getting wet, and it's staining the white plastic with brown reddish marks, and it has also stained the bottom of this enclosure. Now, whether that's going to come off or not, I'm not sure, but the interior of this enclosure is an off-white, which I really, really like because it allows the natural light from the window or the room light to reflect off of it and light up the inside of the enclosure more, which I absolutely love. And that's why I prefer white enclosures, off-white or gray, to completely black enclosures. They are not my favorite because they're not a friend to the natural light from windows or skylights, and they don't reflect the room light either. But this ReptiChip is staining the off-white interior, and then there's some stains on this white table from where the ReptiChip has come out. But it doesn't look like he needs any additional bedding. It looks like all I need to do is put his enclosure furnishings back in and moisten that a little bit, and he's good to go back inside. All right, TC's enclosure is all cleaned. It's put back together. He's got his swimming pool back in there, his water dish back in there. He had two of these. I just put one back in there. I put the new humid hide on this end, and I put the old humid hide that was on this end on top of the new one, just so that there's some continuity, and then next time we clean, we'll probably take that one out and put something else on top. And then on this end, because I didn't want to change anything or change too many things at once, and I didn't want to change anything on the end where he spends the most of his time, especially while he's in blue, is I'm just putting him exactly back where we found him. So he's got his black hide here, he's in his same humid hide, and this was just a Gladware container. It says Gladware interlocking lids. So this was just a container that is used for food storage that I had drilled a hole in the top using the hole saw, and it's the Humid hide he's been using the most, and I think it's because he outgrew the other one. So I'm leaving the smaller one in there just for continuity, and I put the larger one that we just made on bottom, and then next time I do any changes, I'll take the small one out, and I will either leave this new Humid hide empty for him to lie on top of as a ledge, or I may put another hide on top of it, or a rock, or anything, because it's a flat surface that's now usable. We're all set. The other thing that I just want to mention, because I followed up with Garrett after last week's video about the sizes of super dwarfs and about TC's weight. So in the last video, I mentioned that TC was 270 grams, and because he is the only super dwarf reticulated python that I have, I wasn't sure how to gauge if I was underfeeding him, overfeeding him, feeding him just the right amount, where he should be in relation to his conspecifics. Garrett has 3 of his clutch mates still at Reach Out Reptiles, and he weighed them, and they are all 3 also in the 200 gram range. So TC was actually heavier than the other 3 at 270 grams. The other 3 were all different weights, but a little bit less than 270 grams. And so I know that TC is about where he should be. TC thinks I'm underfeeding him because he acts hungry quite often, but I think I'm feeding him just the right amount, if not giving in to him a little too much, because at 270 grams, he is a little bit bigger than his 3 siblings that Garrett still has. And when I say bigger, I just mean he weighs a few grams more than them. But that doesn't necessarily mean it's not because of other reasons. He's a male, those other 3 are females. He also gets a lot of exercise where he is building a lot of lean muscle mass. I offer him opportunities to do climbing and to do exercise and to do activities, and he engages in those activities, and so he's quite strong and he's building muscle. And muscle weighs more than fat and other soft tissues, and so it may be another reason why he's a few grams more than his sisters. I am just happy that he and his 3 siblings are all within the 200 gram range. I think that Garrett told me the lightest one was around 204 grams and TC's 270 grams, and the others were in between, that he's about where he should be. I don't feel like I'm underfeeding him or overfeeding him. I'll probably just continue feeding him the way that I have been, because that's been working out. So until next time, everybody, please remember to always be kind and love your animals.